Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Vermont has earned a reputation for brewing some of the best beer in the world. Our state has more breweries per capita than any other state, and they generate more than $300 million each year. The economic success is related, in part, to the cost-effective environmental practices that Vermont breweries have put in place, with support from the state of Vermont. As Rebecca Gollin tells us, Vermont's Department of Environmental Conservation plays a role in the success of the state's craft beers.
With the highest number of breweries and the most beer consumed per capita, it's safe to say that Vermonters like beer. On this day, attendees from around the state came together for the 2018 Brewery Day. It's a day of workshops and talks about state regulations and permitting requirements for starting and operating a brewery.
Some of the challenges that our brewers do face are just figuring out what are all the different agencies I do need to be working with to get off the ground. And that's what makes this day great, because they're getting some of those questions answered today of, okay, this is who I need to be contacting regarding wastewater, regarding my permit to open, and so forth.
Participants include those who operate established breweries, as well as those just getting their business going.
So we were seeing really preventable compliance issues coming in the door, and we thought to ourselves at DEC, how can we give brewers the resources and tools they need to avoid these preventable violations?
Really on time.
Catherine Craig is a compliance specialist at the Department of Environmental Conservation, who hosted the event. There were representatives from the Department of Health, Liquor Control, and the Natural Resources Board, among others.
In the afternoon, we're really focusing the panels on sustainability, so ways that brewers can go above and beyond to achieve sustainability throughout their brewing practices. So keeping their brewery staff safe, making sure that there are as few toxics as possible in their brewery operations, looking at waste, water, and energy use.
Very interested in wastewater, because I know from working in breweries and having friends that have had breweries, it's all about the wastewater. and I don't, I really didn't know too much about it or where to even begin. And so
Brett Seymour has been homebrewing for over a decade. And after winning a statewide homebrew competition in 2015, he's planning to open a brewery in the Waterbury area.
It's a big step going up from homebrewing into professional brewing, and it's a little nerve-wracking. There's a lot to wrap your head around, because I'm familiar with brewing and brewing practices, but it's all the other things of opening a business that terrify me. Licensing being a really big part of it, which is why this is really important to come to for me. Because I don't know much about the licensing. It's a huge, huge part of it, and I don't know, it's been very beneficial for me to get to mostly know who it is that I'm supposed to be contacting.
Things are always changing. There's nothing in the craft beer industry that's static.
14th Star CEO Andrea Gagne is here to learn about what's new or changing in the industry. It's just one of the ways she keeps up. Gagne, who came on board when the brewery expanded a few years ago, knows how important it is to stay on top of changing regulations.
With any sort of expansion like that, there's going to be, I wouldn't say there were huge issues, but there were definite time-consuming and there are, financial expenditures that you don't plan on, and that's something that you only learn when you go through it. So yeah, there were some things that we needed to deal with as far as wastewater and water allocation. That was probably the biggest issue that we faced.
The Department of Environmental Conservation hopes that events like the one this day will help breweries around the state keep those potential issues from becoming a problem.
Get in touch with us. Reach out to Liquor Control. Reach out to the Department of Health, and reach out to the Department of Environmental Conservation. We are here to help. The Environmental Assistance Office has a hotline. We also have, if you look up in your favorite search engine, the Vermont Green Business Program or the Environmental Assistance Office at DEC, we have numbers you can call, so where we're right there, ready to pick up the phone and help you walk through these questions before you run into an issue. So we really want you to be proactive and reach out to us.
Giving new businesses the boost they need to get off to a successful start, and helping established companies expand to their full potential. Brewery Day hits a high note for Vermont's beer makers. In Montpelier, I'm Rebecca Gullen with Across the Fence.
For more information on Vermont brewers, including events and tours, check out the website on your screen, vermontbrewers.com. Vermont is not only big on beer, it's also famous for food. Farmers markets, CSAs, and product distribution are all part of our local food movement. Vermont-based energy is also a growing sector of our economy. It's a combination of local energy and food, along with engineering, that is allowing the Vermont Farmers Food Center in Rutland to literally fuel itself. Across the Fence's Keith Silva tells us more.
It's in some ways an old community store. It's not just a shopping place, but it's where people come to catch up on the week's activities.
Every Saturday from November through April, Farmers Hall at the Vermont Farmers Food Center bustles with vendors, customers, and food. After $250,000 in renovations, this old foundry building has become the heart of a local food renaissance in Rutland.
Greg, how many vendors do you have in here on a Saturday?
We have 87 spaces.
Greg Cox is a farmer and a co-founder of the Vermont Farmers Food Center.
We opened this building up in November of 2012 with no heat. And because we didn't have enough money and we were struggling to figure out the most effective ways of doing it. Cheapest short term is propane modines. The amount of fuel that we would consume that first year just was frightening.
The cost to heat this 15,000 square foot space with propane was unsustainable. So Cox started asking around after alternative solutions to the problem.
I met Chris Callahan, and he was the first agricultural engineer in the state, attached with UVM. And we started conversations. He loved the project. And right around a year ago, there was the potential for some grant funds to put in a biomass boiler.
The boiler itself was designed in Austria. It's currently being built in Troy, New York.
Instead of using fuel oil like propane, a biomass boiler uses wood chips or wood pellets, and in some cases, grass pucks. Biomass boilers like this, that can burn a variety of fuels, don't come cheap.
The multi-fuel biomass boiler comes at a premium. A comparable propane unit heater would be about $3,000. A comparable fuel oil boiler would be about $5,000, and this unit is about $55,000. That does get paid off over time in fuel savings, and in recent estimates, I'm arriving at about a 3 or 4 year payback period to pay off that premium through fuel savings.
Industrial-sized biomass boilers typically burn wood.
It's very efficient.
UVM Extension agronomist Sid Bosworth has been testing how the boilers do when burning alternative fuels like switchgrass. Bosworth's research is in collaboration with a landowner at Meach Cove in Shelburne. After being cut, the grass is left in the field until the following spring. Then it's harvested as hay and pressed into pucks to be burned as fuel. When Cox heard about this, he saw how local fuel could take on a whole new meaning.
We would have the capacity in the future to be using waste product from agricultural producers. Oftentimes farmers have to cut to keep the hayfields in good shape. They cut around the edges, and that product is left on the ground and has no value. And we're thinking, This is another way we can help support agriculture and farmers in the region.
We've all known Greg for long enough to know that, if he wants something done, he's going to get it done. So if we were going to hitch our wagon to anybody around here, this was the place to do it.
Jackson Whalen is the co-owner of Vermont Maple Sriracha. His business is the first tenant in Farmers Hall, where they've built a kitchen to manufacture a line of sriracha-flavored cashews. For Whalen, having to pay for fuel oil is, well, nuts.
I would love to give you all the nice, flowery, good-feeling things about local and sustainable, but at the end of the day, it's really helpful for our bottom line because it's a much more stable price than propane. So we realize right now, this winter, we're riding out an artificially low dip in propane prices. So next year, what we're paying for gas may be twice what we're paying this year. We're reasonably assured that biomass is going to be a, steady increase instead of these spikes and valleys. But at the end of the day, it just makes sense from a business standpoint to hook into that boiler that's out there producing heat from renewable resources with a stable price.
Like the price of gasoline, the cost of propane can fluctuate drastically. A biomass boiler offers a business owner more control, which keeps more money in their pockets.
10 years ago, I would have never predicted propane would be below $1 per gallon for a wholesale purchase, and that's roughly where we're at right now, and that's surprising to most people. Fossil fuels are at a relatively low price point right now, and it does make biomass systems very difficult to pencil out. But taking the longer view, I don't think anybody thinks that we're going to stay at the propane prices we're at right now. And the other attraction for a biomass fuel that's farmer made is that they control their own destiny. And so it takes them out of the volatility of the propane and oil markets to heat their spaces.
Cox knows the investment in the boiler will pay off in only a few short years. He has another investment in Callahan and UVM Extension, which Cox expects will go on forever.
One of the skill sets that the Extension Service brings is the relationship, and they are in fact that connective tissue between so many organizations. The chances of us realizing that there were funds out there for a project like this were little or none, because most of the farmers, most of the producers, and even many people in the community are not aware of the resources that are available. And sometimes it's not just what you know, it's who you know and how to put it together. The amount of hours that Chris spent on this project, it's just unbelievable. He was here anytime we needed him for whatever was going wrong, and really kind of actually pushed us in a lot of ways to make sure that we knew what we were doing, that this is how it was going to go. And, we couldn't have done it without Extension, for sure. Absolutely. No, there's no question about that.
One of the main drivers for me is really supporting farmers and food-related organizations to do what it is they want to do. So for me, it was about helping the Vermont Farmers Food Center fuel themselves and heat themselves locally. And so it's a key driver for me to enable them to follow that wish and to meet that goal. It's also part of what Extension does, tying together the research. So the field research that Sid Bosworth and our other agronomists have done looking at the perennial grass crops to actually make fuels out of, tying that together with some of the combustion testing we've done with Meach Cove and Chris Davis up in Shelburne, to then have that all come together and support another installation which demonstrates the local sourcing for local heating is really what we're all about.
As a farmer, Cox always takes the long view. He knows in every single seed is the promise of a great harvest.
There's the here and now in what exists, and you have to operate within that. But you have to understand the potential of what the future can bring. We're like a new farmer. We have, there's a lot of money going out the door, and we have to make sure that it's spent well. This was absolutely money well spent.
In more ways than one, It's local food that's fueling a revival at the Vermont Farmers Food Center in Rutland. In Rutland, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
In addition to UVM Extension's work on the biomass boiler, funding for the project came from the Farmers Food Center, the Vermont Bioenergy Initiative, and the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.